Good afternoon, it's Friday the 28th of June 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish, and we're delighted to be joined by David Scott. David reporting from north of the border with Northern Exposure. Good news.
Oh, well, brilliant news, yes. G20 kicked off today. Here's the family gathering. Mainstream media really focusing on Trump and slagging him off in every possible way, and also Putin as well. Putin gave an interview to the Financial Times and the BBC, but it's really impressive because Theresa is there. So here she is attending the G20, and they had to push out a little bit of video to let us know who was going to be attending. G20 members make up almost 90% of global GDP, apparently 80% of world trade. So this is all good stuff, 2/3 of the world's population. So this is all taking place at the moment, and we've got to remember that the UK has shaped so many policies, for example, online extremism, global warming and all this kind of stuff. We're stronger when we work together. That's the message of the British government, so we should be impressed. And here is Theresa sitting at the first session this morning. So that's really fantastic stuff. Of course, there was some slightly more serious stuff going on as well. A meeting of the BRICS being led by, of course, President of Brazil, President of Russia, Prime Minister of India, President of China, and the President of South Africa. So Putin said it's important not only register existing problems, let's work together on searching for solutions. So he's thinking about solutions mainly. And of course, Donald Trump was there as well. He was having a good laugh when he was meeting Putin earlier on. So nonetheless, the pressure, or at least the ire of the mainstream media on Donald Trump mainly so far, but not necessarily as far as the British government is concerned. While the British mainstream media is looking at Trump, the British government looking at Putin. So, well, he was, before he went to the G20, looking forward to meeting Theresa May, and he had this to say: I think both Russia and the United Kingdom are interested in fully restoring our relations. At least I hope that a few preliminary steps will be made. This was during his conversation with the journalists from the Financial Times. They had asked, obviously he was going to have a meeting with Theresa May. Do you think there's a possibility of some improvement in Anglo-Russian relations after the Skripal affair? And he went on to say, Putin went on to say, I think it would be easier for Mrs. May, maybe because she's leaving and is free to do what she thinks is right, important and necessary, and not to bother about some domestic political consequences. Well, that certainly seems to be the case. She clearly didn't she clearly didn't care about what the consequences of her actions would be, because this is how she decided to greet Vladimir Putin this morning when she arrived. As you can see, a pretty glum look on her face. I mean, she basically blanked him. Brian, this is a disgrace, isn't it? This is not how diplomacy is done.
It's very childish. I know she's got her chains round her neck again, so whether that's significant. But yeah, very childish behaviour.
David, welcome to the programme. What did you think of Theresa May's greeting of another world leader?
You would think she could manage to crack a smile. I mean, she's paid enough. That's about all she's got to do, is stand there and smile. Didn't look awfully well either. Looked worried. Not a good flight from the UK, I suspect. Yeah, that wasn't good. None of that was good.
She might have thought she hadn't got her wet wipes with her, of course.
Well, there's always that danger. Well, this is what she had to say. We see other Russian activity around the world. We see the use of disinformation, cyber attacks, and we need to see Russia desisting in that activity. So she was pretty vociferous. It's not business as usual, and it can't be business as usual with Russia until they stop the sort of acts we've seen them doing around the world. I want to see the individuals against whom charges have been brought to justice. Russia does not allow the extradition of its nationals, but there are European arrest warrants out for the two individuals. This is referring to the Skripal poisoning alleged. And as soon as they set foot outside Russia, we'll be making every effort to bring them to justice. Yes, in the meantime, this is what the greeting between Putin and Trump was like, much more amicable. So if we compare that, we see a slightly different attitude. Trump said, "Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great honor to be with President Putin, his representatives, my representatives. We have many things to discuss, including trade, including some disarmament, a little protectionism, perhaps, in a very positive way. We're going to discuss a lot of different things. We've had great meetings. We've had a very, very good relationship, and we look forward to spending some good time together." And he said a lot of very positive things are going to come out of the relationship. So Vladimir, thank you very much. So a somewhat different approach between Putin and Mrs. May. So as frosty as things are between Britain and Russia, slightly less frosty it seems between the US and Russia, and perhaps a little surprisingly, or maybe not, defrosting somewhat with Europe. Now, this is not the European Union, despite the flag in the top right-hand corner. This is the Council of Europe, not the European Council. I understand why people would get confused about this, but the Council of Europe is something somewhat different. It's confused with the EU sometimes. This is because the EU stole the Council of Europe's flag, which was originally designed in 1955, and the EU, of course, also stole the Council of Europe's anthem. Member states of the European Union, of course, give some of their sovereignty across to the EU. This is not how member states of the Council of Europe behave. They maintain their sovereignty, but they act through international treaties and international law instead. But anyway, the Council of Europe had taken a decision some time ago to expel Russia, which had been part of this organization, from the Parliamentary Assembly. This was in 2014 as a result of the Ukraine situation. They've now decided through a resolution which was passed a couple of days ago by 118 to 62 with 10 abstentions to reverse that decision. So the Russian delegation will take part in the June session of the Parliamentary Assembly. And the Russians are quite positive about this. We're determined to stay patient and systematically explain the Crimean issue until our foreign partners change their mind. Well, they have changed their mind, but Peskov said that this was a victory of reason. So a mixed picture with respect to international relations and Russia. But David, it's a bit... how do we put this? The Council of Europe, the European Council, it seems to be deliberately hiding the sort of relationship between these things by being deliberately confusing. So it was a little bit surprising. I hadn't realized that Russia was part of this organization.
Neither had I. Just going back briefly to the reaction by Theresa May, it would suggest that Theresa May actually buys all the propaganda. She believes all of this stuff, and she believes that Russia is poisoning people in the UK, and she's meeting the man who instructed it personally. Does she really buy all of this? I mean, that would be tremendously naive. I saw the Sun this week reported an MOD scientist at Portondown has been charged over child sexual abuse charges after paedophile hunters ensnared him trying to meet what he believed was a 14-year-old girl. Maybe that's more to do with what went on in Salisbury. You know, people being open to blackmail, people being manipulated, people being able to concoct a story. I think the Prime Minister should be more open-minded.
I think bearing in mind what Brian's been reporting over the last couple of weeks with suggestions from professionals that Theresa May is experiencing, some kind of cult-like behavior and cult-like indoctrination. I think that suggestion that she perhaps actually buys into this narrative is probably pretty close to the mark.
Yeah. But who knows? She doesn't look well. Well, we shouldn't worry, and David will say to you, shouldn't be worried about what's happening with the Russians, because we've got one of our top politicians onto it, and Madeleine Moon here. Now, remember that this lady was the lady who got very upset when we tried to give a talk in South Wales about suicides amongst young people. It was the first time ever, it's the only time there was ever a protest and a talk given by the UK column, and it was quite clear that part of that was agitated by the local Labour Party connected to Madeleine Moon. We'll come back onto that perhaps another time. But here we are, Madeleine Moon. Well, some people calling for her to resign over the fact she's betrayed her constituents over Brexit. But we think she's up to rather different matters. And we were just stunned to see that this former social worker is now president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So, David, absolutely nothing to worry about. We've got defence and security in very safe hands. But as we got deeper into this, it got murkier. So what is this NATO Parliamentary Assembly? Well, this is what they say on their own website. I think this should play through a little sequence in a minute. Is that going to happen? Let's see. So we've got Defence Committee's visit to China. We've got innovation and experimentation. We've got support for the alliance remaining as strong as ever. Legislators press NATO to protect values and election processes. And it began, of course, there with talking about Ukraine. So this is really extraordinary. This isn't just NATO, which is going to defend the members in the Western world. This is NATO that's now getting in amongst values and election processes. But have a look at what they say about themselves. So this is a map of their membership. So this is quite a little global empire building up here. Encourage people to go and have a look at this themselves. This is what they say about their work. They've got committees, sessions, the Rose-Roth program. That's to do with some American senators, Mediterranean and Middle East special group, transatlantic relations, Ukraine, Georgia, Russia, Afghanistan, gender and security, and election monitoring. So we shouldn't be worried because NATO is now looking after democracy wherever it is. But it gets better and a little bit murkier because they are linked up with this organisation, the Geneva Centre for the Democratic Control of Armed Forces. And this is an international foundation where the mission is to assist the international community in pursuing good governance and reform of the, quote, security sector. Now, David, I thought you may pick up on that little bit because, of course, when they're talking security, they are using the European Union definition of security. So that is defence, it is the military, it's the police, it's security services, it's intelligence services. We've got a strange organisation in Geneva which is helping the world get to grips with its security. I think what we're looking at here is the drawing in of military nations and the military of nation states into an embryonic global military system. That's what I think we're looking at. But to see Madeleine Moon, apparently the roads are fine in her constituency, the hospitals are working well, schools are going well, jobs are good. So she hasn't got much to do in the constituency, so she stepped in to help NATO out. What do you think, David?
Well, the thing that first hits is the complete lack of any qualification for that job. Right, a social worker. It's a very strange choice. You have presumably every parliamentarian in the Western world to choose from. It just seems a bizarre choice that's where you go. The other thing was that map: Egypt, Jordan, large parts of the former Soviet states now sitting on the southern border of Russia. It's a very interesting map. It does look global in its ambitions. Very fascinating.
Yeah, well, we'll be doing more work on that and hopefully we'll be able to find out a bit more about Madeleine over the Moon's input.
Yes. Okay, now if you like what we do at the UK Column, you'd like to support us, then please get over to the community website. That's ukcolumn.org/community, and there are options to join up with us there. Just a quick reminder that AV10 DVDs still available on the UK Column shop, and the price of those will change on Monday, close of play on Monday, because the sort of pre-order price. Those DVDs will ship on Monday and the pre-order price expires at that time. So just a few days to get at that price. And just to let everybody know that AV 10.1 has a date and a place now. I don't know who's going to be speaking at that, other than I believe Brian will be speaking at it.
I think I may be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that will take place from 10 until 6 on Sunday the 27th of October this year in the Holiday Inn, Wrights Lane, Kensington. More details at alternativeview.co.uk, where you can get tickets.
And I've got to say, a brilliant title for that one, A Culture of Deceit and the Pantomime of Politics.
Absolutely.
Ian's got that one spot on, I think.
Okay, David, let's head up to Scotland. And well, I saw a number of mainstream media outlets covering this today. The allegations, the false allegations of causing injury and illness to children.
Yes. Now this comes from a condition originally called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and there were so many cases where children were wrongly taken away from their parents by over-officious and aggressive state officials, that the whole concept of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which seemed to be based on not very much, fell into disrepute. In fact, the phrase, the name, became entirely toxic, like wind scale. So they changed the name. So the Sellafield equivalent is fabricated and induced illness, which means Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And the harm is continuing. So here's the BBC reporting a woman in Aberdeen who reached out to the state for help, and well, the state didn't respond very well. She described how her world was turned inside out, and she was suspected of causing her daughter's illness. Now, this happens if your child presents with something the medical profession don't understand, then rather than saying and admitting their own limitations, it's parents who are targeted. You must be causing it, right? Based on nothing. So this poor woman, she described here how she was treated like a monster over concern she was inducing her daughter Beatrice's illness. Her daughter was taken into foster care. The family was not reunited until a year later. Can you imagine the harm caused to that child and everybody in that family by that action? Right, and the BBC here try to kind of put a sop in to excuse this. FII is a rare form of child abuse, which occurs when a parent or carer, usually a child's biological mother, exaggerates or deliberately causes symptoms of illness in the child. Now, they've had to put that in because that's the official government line, right? The line seems to be entirely fictional, that what you're actually seeing here is abuse by the state. In every case I've ever come across, it's abuse by the state. So a quote here from the mother: "It is terrifying because you were living your life and everything was going well, and suddenly everything is blown to pieces." And I think we could all sympathize with that. Imagine having a child presenting with perhaps something quite mild in terms of an illness, and then your family's ripped apart. The consultant pediatrician responsible for this is Dr. Marianne Cochrane of the Royal Aberdeen Children's Hospital. She led the concerns, which led to a police investigation, which led to the mother being interviewed by the police. So a little more on this lady. She is part of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, and it chairs the Child Protection Subcommittee in Scotland. So she's very senior. So this is a role where she'll be setting policy, or at least influencing policy. She'll be listened to by government ministers and other health professionals. And then this next slide is one of the talks that she's given, what neglect looks like. Dr. Marianne Cochrane, consultant paediatrician, lead for child protection. So she's leading child protection in Aberdeenshire. She's training people, she's influencing policy, and she's making decisions like that. It's appalling.
It's appalling, David, and two cases come straight into my head while you're talking on this, because it was the Bonnie Lewis case, where a mum, Linda Lewis, came to see the UK column a great many years ago with one of these Munchausen accusations. She had a little girl taken away from a girl suffering and it was mum who actually got her fully diagnosed as suffering from Zollinger's disease, multiple ulceration of the gut. And even though it was the mother who had ultimately got the correct diagnosis from a hospital in America, the daughter was still taken away from the mother, placed in a psychiatric unit at one point, where the little girl was told that her pain was her imagination. So an absolutely sickening case, happening back then, happening now, continued all the way through.
And of course that she was never reunited.
Never reunited with her mother. And of course, the other thing I noticed in your report there, David, is that we're talking about epilepsy, and I wonder whether the drug Epilim had something to do with this, because this drug at the moment is on record as being involved in damage to some 37,500, I think it is, cases. And of course, it's been Joan and Derek Bye who have fought for well over 30 years since their own daughter died as a result of this damaging medication. So lots of questions to be asked, I think, on this one. Right, do we trust our NHS? Well, thank you very much, as always, to the people who alerted us to this. Of course, privatised healthcare is already here in UK, and it's on the form of My Choice, You Pay. What are we talking about? Well, this is the documentation that started to circulate around the internet. So this is Warrington NHS Trust. Here it is, My Choice. And what have they got? Well, they've got a list of how much it's going to cost to get various operations done. Now, some of these operations you might say, well, okay, these are actually to do with nice to have. But in fact, most of them are operations that people would need, because they may include hips and other more serious ailments. Quite expensive, some of them over nearly £4,000, some of them £1,500. Problem with your finger cost you £700. But what is going on here, because the NHS is clearly now putting out charges to have operations. Well, this is what happens if you go and have a look at this Warrington and Halton Hospital's information, My Choice service. But something's happened, because very quickly you will see this update, 20th of June 2019. The Trust are pausing the availability of this service and reviewing it to ensure it can in no way disadvantage NHS patients. To date, no NHS patients have been impacted on. No one has been treated as part of the My Choice service. The Trust continues to meet all of its diagnostic, cancer and referral to treatment standards. Now, this panicky media release is due to the fact that people have picked up on what's going on here and are saying, hang on a minute, the NHS is supposed to be free, and now we've got a charge coming in. Well, the panic continues with this lady, Mel Pickup, who's the chief executive. And so she's also got posted a very large media statement. But this really says that what is obviously happening, she tries to claim it isn't happening. So I'll just read a little bit of this. Present for many years, there's a growing list of procedures that our commissioners will no longer pay for if criteria are not met. The trust does not make decisions with regard to eligibility for such procedures. There's a national list locally implemented by commissioners. Initially, this list was referred to as procedures of limited clinical value. This then became procedures of lower clinical priority, and these are now referred to as criteria-based clinical treatments. They emerge from evidence-based guidelines reflecting the changing nature of clinical practice over the years and the focus on evidence-based medicine and clinical effectiveness. She goes on to say, these remain available in the NHS in the usual way if the criteria are met, as is usually the case. We're now also able to offer these procedures via our My Choice service to make them more accessible for patients who otherwise would not qualify for them under commissioner guidelines. So she goes on to say, don't think that we're charging for our services. We're not. What we're actually doing is charging for our services. And of course, it's not just Warrington. We know that this is NHS wide. So we've taken some information from the Liverpool Clinical Commissioning Group here. And here is this phrase, criteria-based clinical treatments, where the commissioners, and we need to pin down who these people are, can say whether people need to charge for the medical treatment that they need. David, you might pick up on the language there. I know you're going to say a little bit more a little bit later in the news on that, but a wonderful fabrication of the English language to deceive the public as to what's actually taking place within the NHS.
Yes, it's absolutely astonishing. Free at the point of need. Well, yes, terms and conditions apply. And the terms and conditions that apply are, we can't possibly afford that. So we're going to decide in an arbitrary, high-handed and authoritarian manner what reduced list of services that are going to be free at the point of need, and everything else will charge for.
Right.
And even then, the bizarre thing is they won't even solve the problem, right? Because the NHS, based on socialism, based on Stalinist views, doesn't work for two reasons. One, there's an incentive problem. If you make it free, you have too much demand on things like doctors' time because it's free, right? That's the problem. They're not actually tackling that problem. They're just gouging money from the public. And the other problem is if you don't have genuine market prices, then you don't know where to put more resources. There are no price signals, so you can't adjust what the production is doing to meet demand. But as long as it remains one giant organization with prices set by bureaucratic principles in some non-smoke filled room, we're not attacking that either. So we're having all of the downside of having people charge for services, and we're getting no benefit from it in terms of better services. It's quite remarkable.
It is remarkable, but not to worry, because Mel Pickup has been picking up a bit more money, because a little bit of research, we discovered that there's been great consternation over charges in the hospital car parks, where they've picked up about 1.3 million from people visiting unwell relatives and friends, 1.3 million in fines. Politically, of course, there isn't a problem with the NHS. So let's come to Gary Streeter, because a little while ago he was saying it was all conspiracy theory to suggest that the Conservatives were privatising the NHS. And we just came across this little tweet back in November 2017. And Gary Streeter said, great to have Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt with us in Southwest Devon yesterday. Great passion for the NHS, safe in our hands. So there we are. Think about that in relation to those the fee schedules we've just shown. He was picked up by two people here. We've one said, well, at least if you're unseated at the next election, you'll have a career as a comedian ahead of you. And Old Bird said, give me a break. Only those in the know were told of his recent visit to Derriford. No one else knew until afterwards. If he was so passionate, he would have met staff and explained his rationale for actions, but we are not privy to his agenda. And I'll end with this. Gary Streeter, on the morning of June the 23rd, his Sunday morning thought, isn't our God amazing to have created such a glorious world? And I thought, well, okay, that's fine for you, Mr. Streeter, with your big house and grounds and your privileges and your lordship. But for the rest of people in the country suffering under the Conservative agenda, it's all a bit different. I'm not sure which God he's supporting anyway, but maybe it's the God of this world.
Right, where does that take us then? Lord Falconer is watching you.
That's for David.
Is it?
Yes, Lord Falconer is watching you. Or rather, Lord Falconer's watching Gilad Atzmon. He's just not watching him very closely. So he had an assault or attack on Gilad, where he rather missed the point, right? He said that Gilad blamed Grenfell Tower on Jerusalemites, right, which is the word that Gillard used, right, and then equated this to anti-Semitism, which just signifies that he had never actually taken the trouble to listen to anything that Atzmann said and didn't follow the argument. And Atzmann here replied, if the ignoramus lord engaged in even elementary research, he would find out that Jerusalemite isn't terminology I invented. The Athens v Jerusalem dichotomy is a central philosophical concept introduced to the English-speaking world by Jewish philosopher Leo Strauss. If Lord Falconer did his homework and read my words, he would find that whenever I refer to Athens and Jerusalem, I always emphasize that Jerusalemite does not mean Jews. So there we go. So it doesn't matter if black is white, you'll still be attacked if the words can be used against you in a weaponized fashion. More on that later. Now, this wasn't the only person attacking our dear saxophonist. No, the Margaret Hodge was having a go too. She said, now this was relating to Chris Williamson, the left-wing Labour MP who was suspended for saying the Labour Party was too apologetic over the charges of anti-Semitism. I still don't understand how you could be suspended for that, but he was. He was accused of Jew baiting and he was suspended, and then he was reinstated. So there's been a whole furore again about his reinstatement, including Margaret Hodge. And Margaret Hodge said that Chris Williamson defended or supported a jazz musician whose view was that Hitler didn't go far enough. So that's what she attributed to Atzmann. Now, this is Atzmann explaining exactly what he did say in his book, right? And he was given a warning about the sort of backlash that might await the Jews if Israel prompts a war with Iran. Now, surely that is A, a timely warning, and B, something that shows love and concern for the Jews. So again, the charge is completely false. It's not just false, it's the opposite of reality. We see a lot of this.
Well, yes, and we've seen a lot of it from Margaret Hodge over the last couple of years, for sure. Now let's move back to Scotland then, and the Battle of Mearns Academy. Now, if anybody, David, if anybody wants to remind themselves what this is about, you need to look at last Friday's program, but you've published an article about this now.
Yes, so this was an exchange between a school teacher and a 17-year-old schoolboy. And the 17-year-old schoolboy had created a website, and this website offered choices to be either male or female. And he was told that this was not acceptable and that he had to have other genders. And when he said, no, sir, that's silly, there are only two genders, you could either be male or female, everything else is a choice, he was excluded from class for wrongthink. And he subsequently videoed and put on social media the exchange with the teacher. And this, last time I checked, was approaching 400,000 views worldwide. So it's clearly hit a chord that goes far beyond Mearns Academy and Aberdeenshire. So what we've done on the article is we've gone through it line by line. It's not a particularly long exchange. We've gone through it line by line and analysed the language, and what a fascinating story it is. One of the people we quote here is Roger Scruton. Now, he has also been suspended and demoted and demonetised of late for wrongthink. But he summed this up in a book in 2006. He says, talking about newspeak. Newspeak occurs whenever the main purpose of language, which is to describe reality, is replaced by the rival purpose of asserting power over it. Newspeak sentences sound like assertions, but their underlying logic is the logic of a spell. They show the triumph of words over things, the futility of rational argument, and also the danger of resistance. That's absolutely spot on. So we go through the exchange in detail, and my conclusion at the end of the article is this. The exchange shows how newspeak seeks to gain power over people. Every time a man or a woman accepts a ridiculous proposition, every time they remain silent in the face of the linguistic wizardry that reverses truth, inverts logic, and turns black into white. A little bit of their mind, their soul, and their spirit is broken. But this realization offers us a means of resistance. For every word spoken in truth and every falsehood exposed heals us. And as we grow stronger, we grow more formidable, and the wizards flee in confusion. If we determine never to miss an opportunity of telling the truth, then by that means alone, we join the resistance to evil. It is as simple as that. So I hope people will read the article and enjoy it and get something from it.
And share it, please. Please do share it, and we're happy to take any comments. Okay, let's move on. Back to the G20, David, and here's Theresa May again, because she is busy. We should do all that we can to bring the best minds together across industry to develop technology to tackle the misuse of live streaming. So what's this about? She is calling for immediate action to improve the response to terrorist content online. So she's going to be speaking today at the G20 on innovation, digital economy, and artificial intelligence. She's saying that governments need to learn lessons from previous terrorist attacks, including the Christchurch shootings. She's going to urge people there to collaborate between governments and tech companies to prevent terrorist exploitation of the internet. She wants to set up a new crisis response mechanism, which is being developed by technology companies and supported by the UK and others as part of the Christchurch call. And this is going to allow companies to more rapidly stop the spread of terrorist or violent extremist content following any attack in coordination with each other. There's going to be a crisis hotline so that digital fingerprints of any video that's uploaded can be shared across companies, and that will prevent the re-uploading of content. And she's going to stress the need for continued development of technology to address terrorist abuse of live streaming, which has a devastating impact on victims, families, and communities, as they say. This is mainly being organised through the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism, which was created following the Westminster terrorist attack. And Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Microsoft, they're the main companies involved in that. They're already making use of technology, they say, for automatically removing terrorist propaganda. And they have already worked with over 100 smaller platforms. And she's going to say that that they now need to see tools and expertise being shared with others to build a capacity of industry to tackle terrorist content online. What else did she have to say here? There are no easy answers, but I'm sure that by combining different methodologies to detect illegal and harmful content, we will be able to find an approach that severely limits terrorist ability to live stream. You'll note the term harmful. Of course, we'll remind everybody that the online harms white paper was published 2.5 months ago. We've got only 3 days now. If anybody wants to take part in in providing a response to this white paper, if you go to ukcolumn.org/censored, there's a timeline there which shows how this situation, the censorship policy, has developed. David, and at the bottom of that article is a link to offer your own views on this. Now, David, the point here is that, of course, Theresa May is presenting this by way of a need to prevent terrorist content being shared online, but there is nothing in this which prevents the tools and techniques being expanded to any other narrative that they wouldn't like.
This is exactly the case, right? This is the pattern we see. Anti-terror laws are now used. Someone got arrested walking a dog on a psychopath because it's a psychopath, not a dog path. In Dundee, under anti-terror laws, people have been arrested under anti-terror laws that don't even exist for filming in the street outside police stations. And obviously named person and legislation like that has always suggested, oh, it's child protection, we must protect the children. It's an excuse to turn people off. It's an excuse to stop people resisting, because everyone will look at someone live streaming murder and find it appalling and want that stopped. And that's the induction. Just sign up to this and we'll make it go away. But this is much bigger. And this means that, well, disinformation will be defined as essentially terrorism. and disinformation is obviously information the government doesn't like. And with that goes free speech.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, we'll keep live streaming, I think.
Yes.
And let's have a look at this. Several people have been talking to us about this particular case. Robin Tilbrook, from English Democrats, who took out a court action to say that effectively we'd already left the European Union. Now, I'm not going to deal with the detail of the case because that's not really the key issue for this particular report. But this is his Twitter page, and he posted this June the 26th. Yesterday we got the very surprising news that a single judge considering our case on the papers refused permission. We're not going to be deterred. On Friday we'll be issuing our appeal in the Court of Appeal. We're also instructing Queen's Counsel in the appeal. Now, Robin Tilbrook is trained at law himself, so there's definitely some substance being put into this campaign. But let's follow it through. Just remind you that, of course, he was attacked and hit piece by the BBC back in 2014. You might like to have a look at that. So the whole article, very long, but if you say what's the thread through it, very demeaning. But United News Network has conducted a special investigation into what's taken place in this hearing, and I think this deserves mention. They said this: as we reported exclusively last night, the judge who took a first look at the Robin Tilbrook case said there was no case to answer. It is with a sense of incredulity that today we were given the name of the judge by sources close to the Tilbrook case, and a simple search of the public social media profiles under the name reveals that the individual mentioned is in fact a politically charged Remainer. Well, we take this at face value. Here is the appointment of the gentleman concerned, Michael Benedict Spencer QC. This is part of the Facebook page, and this is just one of many posts. So here he was saying that he'd actually signed a petition, which was really, we need another petition if it gets too complicated. And there were many more posts, all pro-European Union, and warning what would happen, the disasters that would happen if any Brexit took place. So just think about what that means. But then we've got this angle. So Robin Tilbrook here is warning that he's now been censored on Facebook. I'm not able to read all of this, but you can freeze it on screen, have a look. He suddenly found that he'd been disabled on Facebook. When he tried to find out why, he only got a generic response: you've broken our terms of reference. They then asked him to identify himself, and he said because he'd already identified himself as being politically involved, that had required him to give a lot of information, but he was still blocked. So I just wondered whether it could actually be Mr. Clegg in the background as a Remainer who was blocking him. But there we go. This is what happens when the state starts to censor the truth. It spreads across all manner of things, and it's now into the courts because, of course, the judges are not being exposed for possibility of bias, certainly in this case.
Any thoughts, David?
Bias? Judges bias? How dare you, Mr. Gerrish? Let me give you the Scottish official line on this, right? Judges in this country are so unbiased, so squeaky clean, they don't even need a register of interests, right? Because Peter Kirby's put a petition into Parliament that's been getting a lot of support from scurrilous people like members of the public. And the judges don't want to hear any of this because they are so squeaky clean that they would automatically recuse themselves if there was even any hint of bias. So how under those circumstances you can have a politically charged Remainer who is encouraging people to sign petitions to remain in the EU, not recuse himself from that trial? I'm very puzzled by that. I don't see how that can be at all. It's almost like the case where Scottish judges are presiding over cases where their sons are barristers for one of the sides involved. You would think it's impossible, but it's not.
Yeah, perhaps it's because his specialisation is not the constitutional law, it's actually NHS cases.
Okay, right, we'll just briefly mention this before we go, especially for David. climate bonds. This is the Climate Bonds Initiative. Well, you'll be glad to know that they are aiming to issue $1 trillion worth of climate bonds per year. On the way to that mark, they're delighted to announce that they've reached over $100 billion of climate bonds issued this year so far. And this is the first time they've managed to hit that target by the middle of the year, so they're very excited about that. Now, these climate bonds are what they describe as a growing category of fixed income securities, which raise capital for projects with environmental benefits. I'm not quite sure about that, but anyway. They said that reaching 100 billion in green bond issuance for the third time and so early in the year is welcome. However, the global climate finance challenge is to reach a 1 trillion in annual green investment early in the 2020s. So that's good stuff. Now, I wonder who might be behind this. Let's have a quick look. So here are the funders of Climate Bonds Initiative. So we've got Bloomberg Philanthropies, NAB, we've got the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bank of America, HSBC, of course. And as we head down the list here, we've got the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Frederick Mulder Foundation, Oak Foundation, Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, FSD Africa. Well, FSD Africa has funded itself by UK aid and the UK government to reduce poverty through financial sector development. So that should be clear to everyone. National Australian Bank, European Climate Foundation, Sainsbury Family Charitable Trust, EU's Horizon 2020, Climate Works Foundation, UNDP, Climate KIC, KR Foundation, and Martin International. And of course, they're supported pro bono by Clifford Chance, Ashurst, Shaman Sterling. So how can they possibly go wrong? David, this is fantastic. We're seeing all this new money going into the economy for productive green technologies. This is brilliant, isn't it?
Right. Okay, Mike. One question. In the world of zero interest rate policy, what's the coupon on this? What return are they offering? Because I couldn't see it. I did find another one, right, who's offering 8.5 to 12.5% guaranteed return policy scheme. And the whole point is that they're saying we're going to take money and we're going to invest it in something that's less efficient than what the market would choose, because otherwise the market would choose it anyway. And we're going to give you an enhanced return on this. It makes no sense. There must be money coming from somewhere, right?
Yes, but this has been the basis of, sorry, David, this has been the basis of green technology from the beginning, heavily subsidized.
Yes, so the somewhere is the taxpayer, right? Your pocket is being picked to the tune of 1 trillion.
A year.
Well done, Mike. A year.
Yes. How could it possibly go wrong?
Well, indeed, it's all we need to do is to get the right amount of theft, and the economy will thrive. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Okay, and we'll just end with this, David. Some good news to finish.
Yes, some people may choose to stand during this. This is the EU flag being lowered over Edinburgh. Goodbye to the European Commission in Edinburgh. It's been nice knowing you, and I'm sure they are walking away thinking, thanks for all the fish.
So where have they gone?
Away. I don't care. Gone. Somewhere else.
Yeah, I bet you've sent them south of the border. South of the border. You've sent them into England. That's what you've done.
No. Further away than that. Over the water.
Good stuff.
Okay, right, David, thank you very much for joining us. Can we say again, if you're not yet a subscriber for UK Column, please consider taking out a subscription. We need your financial support to continue doing what we're doing, particularly in these challenging times for online broadcasting. And maybe you might consider a donation if you don't wish to take out a subscription. But absolutely vital free media continues. David, excellent. Thank you for that. And nice to end on a very positive note of the EU flag disappearing into the dust. We'll be back at the same time on Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.